A shy street artist, tucked into a quiet corner of the city, sketches the face of a stranger, a man whose story she doesn't know, whose name she doesn't ask. What she doesn't see is the weight he carries, a millionaire stripped of everything that once mattered, drifting silently through the days searching for something, anything, that might make life worth staying for. He says nothing of who he is. She doesn't press. Yet somehow through every tentative line, every shadow she draws, her pencil brushes against the deepest wound in him, as if her hand knows what her heart does not. Two solitary souls meet in the unfinished hush of a portrait, and in that fleeting moment the question lingers, when you've lost everything, would you dare hold on to something real? Because sometimes the thing that saves us is the gaze of a stranger. That evening, Charleston felt suspended in a tender, damp dream. The rain did not pour. It whispered like the long, weary sigh of an old soul. On the red-bricked street, water danced lightly across the stones, as if reminding passers-by that time continued, even when the heart stood still. At the corner beneath the weathered awning of a European-style cafe, the air was laced with the scent of roasted coffee and the faint hum of an acoustic guitar. A Damien Rice melody drifted softly, mingling with the steady rain. It fell onto moss-covered walls, onto the umbrella of a street vendor, and onto the soaked back of a stray cat pressed tightly against the wall, seeking a comfort that didn't exist. In this quiet scene, a small figure hurried to gather her sketches. The oak easel tilted slightly in the moist breeze, papers curling at the edges from the rain. Lily, wrapped in a faded coat, her shoes sodden, cheeks flushed pink from the cold, worked quickly. Her slender fingers swept the drawings into a canvas bag, though her eyes kept straying to the grey sky as if waiting for something unnamed. At 25, Lily had spent nearly 2 years alone in her small attic apartment nearby. On dry days, she always returned to this familiar street corner to set up her modest stall. She sketched portraits, landscapes, even fleeting dreams, each line etched in graphite, each emotion left unspoken. She was quiet, often smiling, faintly but never laughing aloud. Some thought her distant, others called her shy, but only Lily knew she painted happy couples not from experience, but from longing. That day, as she tucked away the last of her brushes, a deep voice startled her from behind. "Excuse me, could you draw my portrait?" She turned. The man stood under the cafe awning, wearing a long black coat, no umbrella in hand. Rain clung to his hair, and his eyes, those eyes, were so deep they dared you not to look, yet made you fear what you might see reflected there. Lily nodded silently. She spread out a new sheet, settled onto her old wooden stool and gestured for him to sit. He did, cautious yet without hesitation. The wind carried the musty scent of ancient stone and faintly lavender, the fragrance clinging to lilies. Woolen scarf soft as rain. In the hush between them, only the scratch of pencil on paper spoke. She began sketching. Hundreds of faces had passed under her hand, but none unsettled her like this. Not because of his features, but because of his eyes. Eyes that had witnessed too much loss. Eyes that had learned how to stay silent. Line by line, his face emerged, the sharp nose, the tight lips, the weary cheekbones. But the eyes, those eyes, were the hardest. Not because they were difficult to capture, but because they seemed to belong nowhere in the portrait. They were too real. "You've lost someone important," Lily murmured, not looking up. The man stiffened, his shoulders tightening before softening again. He didn't deny it, nor did he confirm. Instead, his voice came quietly. "You're the first to look at me." Without judgment. His words, softer than the rain, hit heavier than any thunder Lily had ever known. She said nothing, only lowered her head and kept drawing. There was something in his tone, a silent nod from fate itself. A few minutes later, she handed him the finished sketch. He took it wordlessly, staring down at the drawing, his hand tightening around it as if letting go might cost him a piece of himself. He reached for his wallet, but before he could pull out money, Lily spoke. "No need. I only draw what I..." "See, that's enough." He paused, slipped the wallet back into his coat. Eyes still fixed on the portrait, he said nothing more as he turned and walked away, leaving a long, glistening trail across the rain-soaked street. Lily sat a while, longer, pencil still in hand, the graphite smudged and fading. She did not know his name. Yet she understood this much. Some people come not to stay, but to awaken something long asleep within us. That night, in her small attic room, Lily sat by the window, clutching her worn sketchbook. The rain had not stopped. It drummed softly against the wooden panes, slow as a heartbeat. She opened to a blank page, lowered her pencil, but this time she did not draw. Instead, she wrote in delicate script along the edge. Some eyes make you believe the most beautiful things are never truly gone. After that rain-soaked afternoon, Charleston slipped into night like a heavy quilt steeped in the scent of time. The cobblestone streets gleamed under the hazy glow of old lanterns mounted on weathered walls. The cafe had closed its doors. The stray cat had found a dry awning to curl beneath, and Lily, though home at last, could not quiet her restless heart. Her room was small, just enough space for a single bed, a worn drawing table, a few wilting potted plants, and a battered old radio she often tuned late at night, seeking solace in soft melodies and the tender voices of storytellers. She removed her shoes, hung up her coat and sank down at the frayed wooden table. Before her lay her sketchbook, the only thing in the world that seemed to anchor her to something meaningful. Her hand reached for it, but paused halfway. The paintbrush, still damp, sat untouched. Lily picked it up, not trembling, but gripping it tightly, as if steadiness alone could resolve the knot tightening inside her. The memory returned, vivid and unshaken. That moment, she refused the stranger's money. Her voice had been calm, but inside, she was taut as a drawn wire stretched between pride and a landlord's unpaid demands. She knew she needed money, desperately so. Yet to take payment for something born of raw emotion felt like selling pieces of herself. And when an artist loses what's true, all that remains is technique, and technique alone cannot heal. Lily lowered her head, pressing her forehead to the table. The soft yellow light caressed her pale cheeks, casting faint shadows across the silent room. A faint scratching sound stirred her. Meow. She lifted her gaze. At the window stood the grey stray from earlier, rain-slicked paws patting gently. Against the wood, eyes imploring, "Let me in." A bittersweet smile curved her lips. She rose, cracked the door, and without hesitation, the cat slipped inside like an old friend. It made no fuss, simply leapt onto the chair by the cold hearth and curled up tight. "You know what loneliness feels like too, don't you?" she whispered, expecting no answer. Turning back to the table, Lily flipped through her sketchbook. Each drawing told someone else's story: lovers by the Seine, a mother cradling her child on a subway, a violinist on a street corner. But none of them were hers. Maybe that was why something always felt missing. She stopped at the final page. Yesterday's unfinished sketch stared back. A man sitting alone in a cafe, gazing out at the street, his untouched coffee cooling beside him. His eyes, those eyes, still held that same quiet ache. But tonight, when Lily met them again, she saw herself reflected there. She let the brush fall. Beneath the muted light, her eyes shimmered, not with sadness, but with the fragile comfort of knowing she wasn't entirely alone. Somewhere out there, a man she didn't know was holding onto a part of her. Her drawing. Her soul pressed in graphite, now resting in his hands as if it were the only thing still alive within him. Adrian. She hadn't known his name then, but something about him had felt like rain, not fierce, not overwhelming, but enough to soak quietly through. Meanwhile, in a lavish hotel in the heart of the city, Adrian sat in a cavernous room softened by dim lights. The sketch lay before him, and for hours he hadn't looked away. His fingers hovered over the edge of the paper, gripping gently, as though afraid to crush something newly reborn. It wasn't beauty that held him captive. It was truth. For the first time in so long, he saw himself not as headlines or glossy photographs or whispers of scandal and pity. This was different. This was seen by someone who didn't know his name, by someone who didn't see him as a CEO or a tragedy, just as he was no judgment, no sympathy, only quiet recognition, as if she somehow understood without needing to ask. Adrian's touch grew tender, reverent, as though the drawing itself was fragile, a thread he feared losing. Outside, the rain continued, its steady rhythm. The city slept. The stray cat slumbered near the cold hearth, and Lily, back in her attic room, opened to a fresh blank page. What did she draw? Not a face, not a story, only a pair of eyes, undefined, belonging to no one yet carrying a delicate hope. A belief that art could heal if only one remained brave enough to hold on to what was still true. By early morning, Charleston had shed the rain but kept the hush, as though the city wasn't quite ready to wake. The sun pressed weak fingers of light through the gauzy clouds, tracing faint gold across the half-dry cobblestones. Lily carried her easel back to the street. Though the sky had cleared, remnants of the storm lingered. Wet eaves, drooping leaves, the glistening sheen on the old wooden benches where she often perched. Still, she returned to her usual spot, the very corner where only yesterday something quiet yet profound had unfolded. She spread her cloth, set up her easel, and opened her box of pencils. But instead of drawing, she sat still, resting, her hands lightly on her lap, her gaze soft and far away, fixed on the chair opposite. The chair where he had sat. From across the street, hidden in the shadow of a nearly bare tree, a figure emerged. He did not come too close, nor linger too far. Adrian stood exactly where he had appeared the day before. His dark coat hung, dry now. His hair no longer rain-slicked, but his eyes, those eyes, still carried that quiet sorrow. Lily didn't see him, but Adrian saw her. He stood there, still as stone, as if trying to preserve the fragile moment before it vanished. In his hand, he held an old umbrella, not for rain, but for something else. When Lily turned to fetch water, he crossed the street and left it beside her easel. By the time she returned, he was gone. Only the umbrella remained, leaning quietly against her chair with a slip of paper tucked into its handle. "Don't let the rain steal your smile." Her chest tightened, not from the words themselves, but from the tenderness behind them. Someone at last had thought about her smile. She folded the umbrella carefully and slipped it into her bag. The note, small and unassuming, she pressed between the pages of her sketchbook, next to yesterday's drawing. Tiny offerings, unnamed yet unmistakably personal. To Lily, they felt like being called softly in the dark by someone who knew her without asking. Days passed. Each morning, beneath the same awning, small gifts began to appear, like whispers carried on the breeze. A steaming paper cup of coffee, a modest bouquet of wildflowers wrapped in newsprint, a pristine set of watercolor paints. No grand declarations, no names attached, just presents subtle as rain. Each time Lily found them, she smiled, and softly, but this time the smile was real. That evening, back in her modest room, Lily sat at her desk. The grey stray purred quietly on the chair beside her, coiled like a tiny guardian of secrets. The sketchbook lay open. Her fingers trembled, slightly, not from cold, but from something tender and nameless stirring inside her. She began to draw his face again, but this time something had changed. He was smiling, not wide, not ostentatious, just a hint, like sunlight slipping shyly past heavy clouds. The eyes still carried sorrow, but now they held a sliver of light, fragile, hopeful. She stared at the portrait, her pencil resting quietly beside it. Part of her thought it was wishful thinking, yet deep down, somewhere quiet and hidden, she wanted to believe. Maybe, just maybe, Adrian was smiling somewhere too, for something small. For a girl who refused his money, for a fleeting kindness drawn between strangers. Rising, Lily took the old umbrella, wiped its handle, and hung it carefully on the wall, right beside the faded photograph of her long-lost parents. Somehow the umbrella belonged there now. Somehow so did he. When had a stranger become part of her most familiar space? Outside, the rain returned, but it no longer felt sharp. It tapped gently against the tin roof, mingling with the soft breathing of the stray curled in sleep. Lily closed her eyes, warmth stirring faintly in her chest. Elsewhere, parked quietly near that same street corner, Adrian sat in his car, watching through rain-speckled glass. He saw her, sitting by the easel, eyes brighter than before, a small secret smile gracing her lips. She smiled alone, yet somehow, he knew he was the reason. He didn't step out, not yet. He wasn't ready, but his quiet gestures, each anonymous gift, each unspoken word, were the only way he knew how to say, "I'm still here." Inside him something had begun to thaw. The ice of grief, the hollow ache that wealth had never touched, all of it cracked and softened by a girl who drew without asking, who gave without demanding, and whose eyes listened without speaking. And so, on a night brushed with rain, but no longer bitter, for the first time in a long while, neither of them was truly alone. That weekend, Charleston basked under a sudden, mischievous sun. After days of endless rain, the sky turned a piercing, impossible blue, as if it had never known sorrow. The old town was busier than ever. Tourists flooded the cobbled streets, cameras swinging from their necks, their voices and laughter bouncing against the worn stones. The cafes opened early. Street performers claimed their corners, jostling gently for space, guitars and violins and paintbrushes vying for a glance. Lily was among them. She carried with her an unfinished sketch, the faint, tentative smile of Adrian, not intending to complete it, only to have it near. As she set up her easel, a group of tourists from New York clustered nearby. One blonde woman suddenly froze, her wide eyes locking onto something across the street. Her voice rose, slicing through the morning air. Wait, isn't that Adrian Carter?" Lily looked up, and there he was. Adrian stood just beyond the cafe, bending slightly to buy a handful of wilting flowers from a street child. His movements were gentle, his face serene. But before the moment could settle, the street exploded with the frantic clicking of cameras. Flashes burst through the thin morning light. A lens pressed almost rudely against him. The blonde woman squealed again, breathless with awe. "OMG, he's the tech CEO. You know? The guy from Forbes, his parents, they died in a plane crash, right? He disappeared for like a year." The world around Lily thickened. Her ears buzzed. She watched as Adrian's eyes, those eyes, found hers across the chaos. For a heartbeat they locked, silent, stunned. He didn't flinch, he didn't cover his face. He simply stood there, still and exposed, amid the raised cameras and hungry curiosity. Lily felt something inside her break apart, clean, swift, and irreversible. Her hand slipped. The pencil she had been holding fell, hitting the stone. Pavement with a soft clatter that sounded to her like a door slamming shut. That night, Lily sat alone in her dim attic room, the laptop's cold glow painting her face ghost pale. She typed, "Adrian Carter." The search results flooded in. Articles, interviews, glossy photos. One headline screamed from the screen, "The man who walked away, Adrian Carter and the price." Of loss. The cover image was him, seated in a sleek glass office high above the glittering skyline of New York. He was smiling, but the smile never reached his eyes. Lily stared, her fingers trembling slightly on the keys. And then, instinctively, she slammed the laptop shut, the sudden darkness throwing her own reflection back at her. Fragile, hollow, alone. Beside her, the unfinished portrait rested, his real smile, shy and luminous, nothing like the polished grin from the magazine, but knowing this didn't comfort her. It only made her feel smaller. In a vivid flash, Lily imagined a scene that wasn't hers but could have been. A boy standing beside two white-draped coffins, cameras snapping, reporters shouting, not, "Are you okay?" but, "Who will run the company now?" She saw him years later, alone in a cavernous penthouse, gripping an old photograph until it slipped from his shaking hands, the glass shattering, the faces inside breaking apart. "Loss isn't a word," Lily whispered through tear-blurred eyes. "It's a world collapsing and no one remembers it but you." That night, she curled on her narrow bed, turning her face to the wall. The grey cat padded up quietly, resting, One small paw on her arm, but the warmth barely touched her. Inside, a storm raged, not because Adrian was rich, not because of his past, but because of the chasm, immeasurable, unbridgeable, not of status, but of scars. The countless times someone had been broken and stitched themselves back up, too wary to ever trust again. She asked herself, small and aching, I'm just a girl who draws on street corners. How could I ever reach someone like him? And, in that fragile moment, all the tender hopes, all the imagined smiles felt like a luxury too far from her grasp. Rain returned to Charleston that late afternoon, quiet as a melancholy melody that clung to the air. It didn't pour, but it blurred the edges of memories still too fragile to stand on their own. Lily sat alone in a small cafe tucked deep in an alley, her usual refuge on days when peace felt too far away to draw. No sketches today, just her notebook resting in her lap and her gaze lost in the misted window where raindrops slid down like thoughts she couldn't hold on to, Adrian's. Sudden reappearance in the public eye hadn't left her mind. But it wasn't the headlines or flashing cameras that haunted her now. It was the silence, his silence. The door swung open, ushering in a gust of damp air and something else. Something achingly familiar. Adrian stepped inside. No. Coat, hair darkened by rain but eyes clear, stripped of pretense. For the first time he wasn't hiding behind anything. You were looking for me? Lily asked softly, her voice neither accusing nor evasive. I had to. He sat down, without asking, his movements sure, almost desperate. I couldn't leave things at half-truths. She said nothing, only met his gaze. His eyes, no longer cold, yet still cautious, held space between them. You know, don't you? He asked gently. About you? She nodded. They call you the golden boy who lost everything and built an empire. I've read enough to know I don't belong in that world. I don't belong there either, Adrian murmured. But you are it. Silence slipped between them, soft and heavy as the rain. Adrian looked down at the untouched coffee in front of him, then back at her. Lily, you're the first person who didn't look at me like a headline or a charity case. You just looked as though I'm still human. She leaned back, resting lightly against the chair, her voice steady. And you're the first person I've drawn without needing to imagine who they were. I saw something in you that felt like me. Outside, the rain fell steadily, tracing lines down the glass. They sat parallel, close yet untouched, like those silent drops. Then why didn't you say anything? Lily's voice wavered now, for the first time betraying the tremor beneath her calm. Adrian exhaled, deep, heavy, the kind of breath that released something long buried. Because I was afraid, if you knew who I was, you'd draw me differently, see me differently, like everyone does. People see me as everything, when in truth I have nothing. You may have lost your family, Lily whispered, her eyes fixed on her cooled tea, but don't lose your capacity to love. When he looked up, something in his eyes shone through, raw, unguarded. And you're afraid too, aren't you? He asked quietly. Afraid of being nothing but a pause in someone else's song, she replied, her gaze finally meeting his. Afraid of staying while you continue on without me. Their eyes locked. No tears fell. But if anyone had listened closely, they might have heard something inside them fracture, soft and clean. Neither said stay, so Lily left first. The next day, Adrian returned to the familiar corner, a ritual already carved into him. But it was empty now. No easel, no cloth. No Lily, only a single painting, carefully wrapped and tucked under the awning waiting for him. He unwrapped it slowly. It was his face, smiling. A smile captured in soft, unfinished strokes. The eyes, however, remained incomplete. As though she couldn't or wouldn't finish them, Adrian held the painting in trembling hands, staring long and hard, as rain whispered around him. And for the first time, he spoke. Not to the cameras, not to ghosts, but to the quietest part of himself. Lily, you drew what I thought I had lost forever. Rain had returned to Charleston, not as a threat nor as a whisper of nostalgia. This time it fell with enough weight to make people pause, to force them to find shelter, or if no choice remained, to simply walk through it. Lily chose to walk through. She stood at the bus stop at the end of the street, a small suitcase by her side, her faded coat soaked through. Rain kissed her hands, clung to the canvas bag pressed tightly against her chest. The one holding her sketchbook, her pencils, and fragments of memories she wasn't sure whether to keep or leave behind. The bus hadn't come yet. The wind slipped through the metal rails, sharp and cold. She had left her little room, said goodbye to the grey cat, left behind the unfinished portrait of Adrian on her desk, not as a farewell, but as quiet acceptance. You made me believe in something, real once, but belief cannot survive alone. Across town, Adrian stood in the doorway of Lily's empty apartment, the landlord's kindness having led him there after days of searching. The room was hollow. The desk sat still and bare. The sketch of his smiling face remained, but the eyes were unfinished. He saw it clearly now. They were waiting. Not for an artist, but for him. Below the drawing, a folded note lay quietly. Thank you for making me want to draw honestly again. But I'm not brave enough to wait for someone who may never want to be kept. His heart pounded. Not from memory, but from the present. From a loss happening right now. He didn't plan. He grabbed the forgotten sketchbook and bolted into the rain. No umbrella, no cab, just urgency. The wind lashed against him, rain slicing into his face as he sprinted through smudged crowds and slick streets, each step dragging behind him the ghosts he had avoided for too long. He slipped on a slick curb, fell. Got up. Someone cursed him. A bus roared past, blocking his view. He pushed forward anyway, carving his way through the blur of strangers and headlights and rain. At the bus station, Lily stood ready, her suitcase handled tight in her grasp. The bus had arrived. She clenched her hand, not in certainty, but in confusion. Her heart raced not with hope, but with the weight of something unresolved. Then, through the rain, cutting clean across distance, a voice broke. Lily! She turned, instinctively guarded. But when her eyes found his, everything melted. Adrian stood soaked to the bone, his face raw, his eyes red, not from rain. In his hands, her sketchbook. He held it high, as though bearing his soul. He stepped forward slowly, each stride shedding fear. You left before I could hold on, he said, his voice rough with ache. For the first time, loss wasn't fate's doing, it was mine. Lily didn't move, not away, not closer. She watched him, truly watched him, as though seeing him unmasked for the first time. Then, silently, she let her sketchbook slip from her hands. It hit the ground with intention, not accident. Adrian rushed to scoop it up, and when he handed it back, his fingers brushed hers. A shiver, not from cold, but from crossing some invisible line. I don't know what I can offer you, he confessed, his voice breaking. But if you step onto that bus, I won't forgive myself, because you're the first thing I don't want to lose. Lily said nothing, but in her eyes forgiveness flickered. And deeper still, acceptance. No promises, no grand declarations, just a step forward, into him. Adrian opened his arms, and she stepped into them. They held each other at the bus stop, beneath the relentless rain. The yellow streetlight behind them glowed faintly, wrapping around them like a home newly found, arriving just in time. The cold vanished. So did doubt. In its place, an embrace, tight, unyielding, as if their fractured souls had finally returned to where they belonged. In that moment, there were no thank yous, no apologies, no explanations, only the quiet courage to hold on. After that embrace beneath the cold rain, neither rushed to speak. The bus pulled away, leaving behind two figures standing quietly beneath the shelter, suspended in something tender and wordless. Lily lifted her head, meeting Adrian's gaze in a moment, stripped bare. No more questions, no more fear. Just two souls finally allowing themselves to hold on. Weeks later, spring arrived. Charleston bloomed, almost mischievously radiant, as though the season itself existed to mend wounds too long left untouched. The street corner where Lily once sat sketching on rainy days. A small gallery opened its doors. Its facade was simple, faded red brick, no grand sign, no glaring lights. Only words delicately etched on the window glass. Art without price, just soul. Inside, sunlight poured freely. Sketches hung unframed on plain walls. There were no price tags. Only handwritten notes beneath each drawing. If you see yourself in this, take it home, and remember to keep it with gratitude. Visitors moved from curiosity to quiet reverence. An elderly woman clutched a portrait of her late husband, tears slipping unnoticed down her cheeks. A little girl picked a sketch of a stray cat pawing at a door, her eyes carrying the same longing Lily once knew so well. And in every detail, one small thing caught everyone's attention. Each guest left with a bookmark, printed from Lily's sketches, stamped with the words, "Each of us carries home a fragment of soul." In the far corner of the gallery, Adrian stood by the reception table, not as the CEO of a tech empire, no business card in sight, no designer suit, just a man in a plain white shirt, arranging empty frames for the next display. An old investor friend dropped by, leaned in with a smirk, and asked quietly, from Forbes cover to gallery helper, "Any regrets?" Adrian smiled, soft and easy as spring rain. "Of course. But if I'm not a CEO, I'm still me. If I lose the person who could see and draw the best of me, then I'm no one at all." Lily approached just then, a warm coffee in hand, her smile gentle as she overheard. She said nothing. She simply placed her hand over his, a gesture simple and grounding. That evening, as the gallery emptied, they sat together on the front steps, watching the hum of life pass by. Lily told Adrian about the first time she ever sold a drawing, exchanged, only for a loaf of bread and a heartfelt thank you. "Back then, I thought, even if art can't feed me, I'd still keep drawing, because it's the only thing that ever made me feel truly alive." Adrian tightened his hold on her hand, his voice quieter now. "I once thought money was everything, until I realized it couldn't buy the way you once looked at me." They were far from perfect. He still worked, still held meetings worth millions, still carried the name Adrian Carter in boardrooms and headlines. But every morning, before stepping out into that world, he pressed a kiss to the cheek of the girl who had taught him this. Value isn't measured in accounts or accolades. It lives quietly in the things we choose to hold on to, whether or not anyone else can see them. A gentle spring afternoon bathed Charleston in soft gold. Wildflowers bloomed freely along the cobbled streets, as if the city itself was smiling after a long, weary rain. On the familiar brick-lined avenue, a modest sign hung outside the Gallery Art Without Price, Lily's first solo exhibition, a journey drawn from emotion. No grand banners, no clinking champagne glasses, just the quiet strum of an acoustic guitar tucked in a corner, and visitors arriving slowly, softly, as if stepping into something sacred. Inside, Lily adjusted the largest sketch at the center of the room, the first portrait she ever drew of Adrian under the rain. This time it was finished. He was smiling. But more than that, his eyes held light, not from the gallery lamps, but from her. From the artist whose gaze had changed, deepened, softened, a small child entered hand in hand with her mother. Eyes wide as they took in each drawing. Near Lily, the girl stopped and looked up curiously. "Do you draw feelings?" she asked. Lily knelt, meeting her at eye level, her smile tender. "I do," she said gently. "I draw what the heart sees." The girl hesitated, then spoke in a shy, earnest whisper. "Can you draw missing someone? I want to give it to my mom. She looks sad sometimes when she stares out the window. I think she misses Dad." The gallery fell quiet for a moment, still and hushed. Lily glanced at the young mother behind the child, her eyes brimming, though her smile tried to stay steady. Lily nodded softly. "I can draw that, but you'll have to sit with her while I do, and because missing is only beautiful, when there's still someone to miss." The final piece of the exhibition came quietly into being that day. It was simple. A sketch of the little girl leaning against her mother, both gazing out of an open window, soft light spilling in. No faces, no details, only a luminous space between two figures. And yet, it said everything. It was missing, given form. As the day faded and guests slowly trickled out, Lily stood before that last drawing, thoughtful and still. Adrian approached, hands in his pockets, stopping quietly at her side. "You captured something even memory can't hold on to," he murmured. She turned, meeting his gaze, this time with no distance left between them. "Because we don't need a perfect world," she said softly. "Only a place where we're brave enough to believe in each other." Beyond the gallery windows, the sun slanted gently across old rooftops. A grey cat leapt onto the sill, curling up lazily, content at last, as though it too had found where it belonged. And the story closed, not with a period, but with a breath. Quiet, steady, home. Some encounters seem fleeting, yet reach deep enough to stir a soul long shuttered. In this noisy, restless world, we lose many things: wealth, reputation, even fragments of ourselves. But sometimes all it takes is an honest gaze, a sketch, drawn from the heart, or an embrace in the rain to remind us we are still worthy of being seen, worthy of being held, just as we are. Art, love, memory, longing. They only truly live when we dare to place emotion before judgment and choose trust over fear. The world doesn't need perfection, only a place where we are brave enough to believe in one another. Thank you for journeying with Lily and Adrian through each tender, fragile step. If this story has touched you, even through a single line, a fleeting glance, or one soft ache in your chest, then together we've already drawn something beautiful. Subscribe to stay close to these cinematic short stories, where every tale begins with feeling. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you'll always be part of this path where ideas bloom quietly into stories that find their way home.